The cargo ship, Horizon's Promise, drifted silently through the asteroid-strewn region of the Orion sector, its hull scarred from countless interstellar journeys. Captain Michael Reynolds studied the holographic displays surrounding his command chair, his weathered hands resting casually on the tactical interface. To any external observer, the ship appeared vulnerable. A lone merchant vessel carrying what seemed to be standard industrial cargo. But nothing about the Horizon's Promise was as it appeared. The ship's sensor arrays, carefully disguised beneath layers of seemingly mundane hull plating, tracked the approaching Zorn raiders with meticulous precision. Reynolds knew they were coming. In fact, he had been waiting for them. The Zorn battle group emerged from quantum translation, their massive carrier ships blocking out the starfield. 3 cruisers and a dozen fighter squadrons, a standard predatory formation designed to overwhelm and intimidate. Their biometallic hulls gleamed with an iridescent purple-black sheen, adorned with ritualistic weapon markings that spoke of countless conquered territories. Commander Krulvax of the lead Zorn cruiser studied the human vessel with predatory anticipation. Humans were known to be primitive, their technology laughably inferior. This would be another routine extraction: take the cargo, collect the ransom, possibly keep some crew members for labor or entertainment, initiate standard boarding protocols. Krulvax growled to his tactical officer, his multiple eyes scanning the seemingly defenseless human ship. Prepare capture umbilicals and weapons suppression fields. But Reynolds was already moving. A series of subtle commands flickered across his neural interface. What appeared to be standard cargo containers began to shift, their molecular structures realigning with impossible speed. Weapons ports materialized where smooth hull plating had existed moments before. Quantum-encrypted communication channels opened between the ship's distributed combat systems. The Zorn's first warning came when their targeting systems suddenly went blind. "Tactical disruption," screamed the Zorn sensor officer. "Our lock is..." Before he could finish the sentence, precise energy weapons erupted from the Horizon's Promise. They weren't the wild, desperate shots of a cornered prey. These were calculated strikes designed to systematically disable the Zorn's primary weapon systems. The first Zorn cruiser's starboard energy collectors exploded in a cascade of quantum-fractured plasma. Its fighter squadrons, suddenly without coordinated command, began to tumble into chaotic formations. Reynolds allowed himself a tight smile. This was exactly how they had wargamed the scenario. "Tactical network engage," announced the ship's AI in a calm, almost conversational tone. Zorn communication protocols compromised. Initiating secondary defense matrices, the ship's exterior continued to transform. What moments ago looked like industrial cargo containers now revealed themselves as modular weapon platforms. Adaptive camouflage systems meant each section of the hull could reconfigure faster than the Zorn's targeting systems could adapt. Commander Krulvax watched in mounting horror as his supposedly simple raid transformed into a nightmare scenario. These humans, these supposedly primitive merchants, were dismantling his battle group with surgical precision. "Quantum encryption detected," muttered his communications officer. They're using our own communication bandwidths against us." The Zorn fighters, now completely isolated from their command structure, became easy targets. One by one, they were systematically neutralized, not destroyed, but rendered completely inoperable. It was a message as much as a military action. "We can end you completely. We choose not to." Within 17 minutes, what had been a confident Zorn raiding party was reduced to a collection of disabled vessels, their crews stunned into shocked silence. Captain Reynolds leaned back, reviewing the tactical summary. "Excellent performance," he said quietly to his bridge crew. "Prepare standard post-engagement communication protocols. Let's make sure they understand exactly what just happened." The Horizon's Promise had done more than survive an ambush. It had delivered a message that would resonate through multiple star systems. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The Interstellar Defense Command's primary analysis center hummed with controlled intensity. Holographic displays cascaded with data from the Horizon's Promise encounter, each stream of information color-coded and cross-referenced in real time. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez stood at the center of a circular command platform, her augmented neural interface allowing her to process information at speeds that would overwhelm an unmodified human brain. "Replay sequence Delta 7, she commanded, her voice cutting through the background noise of analysis teams. The holographic display reconstructed the Zorn attack with microscopic precision. Every weapon discharge, every communication burst, every quantum-level interaction was laid bare. Rodriguez wasn't just watching the battle, she was deconstructing it, understanding the mathematical symphony of conflict. Her team consisted of the most brilliant minds Earth could assemble. Dr. Marcus Wright, a quantum communication specialist, stood to her left. His fingers danced across a translucent data interface, pulling apart the Zorn communication protocols like a mechanic dissecting an intricate machine. "Their hierarchical communication model is fundamentally vulnerable," Wright announced. "It's a top-down system with zero lateral flexibility. Our AI can exploit this like a systemic infection." Rodriguez nodded. The Zorn believed in a rigid command structure where information flowed strictly from senior commanders to subordinates. Humanity's distributed network warfare would turn that rigidity into a fatal weakness. A secondary display showed the psychological profile of Zorn military culture. Decades of psychological research had prepared humanity for this moment. The Raiders weren't just a military threat. They were a complex sociological system with predictable behavioral patterns. "We're not just going to fight them," Rodriguez muttered, more to herself than her team. "We're going to reprogram their entire strategic thinking." The first phase of their response would be technological. Earth's research and development teams had been preparing for encounters like this for decades. The modular weapon systems on the Horizon's Promise were just the tip of an enormous technological iceberg. Dr. Aisha Kapoor, head of Adaptive Systems Research, pulled up a schematic that made Rodriguez smile. It was a neural-linked combat network that could reconfigure itself faster than any known alien technology could track. "Each ship becomes a node," Kapoor explained. "Not just a weapon, but a living, thinking part of a larger strategic organism. The Zorn see individual units. We see a single, massively parallel intelligence." By midday, the initial analysis was complete. The team had not just studied the Zorn's attack, they had deconstructed their entire military philosophy. Rodriguez transmitted a preliminary report to the Defense Council. It wasn't just a tactical assessment, it was a comprehensive strategy for psychological and technological warfare. The key vulnerabilities were clear: rigid communication hierarchies, predictable engagement protocols, limited adaptive capabilities, psychological dependence on immediate dominance. "We're going to turn their strength into their greatest weakness," Rodriguez told her team. Specialized AI systems began developing counter protocols. They would use the Zorn's own communication frequencies against them, inserting subtle disruptions that would create doubt, confusion, and internal conflict. It wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about fundamentally altering the Zorn's perception of warfare. In a secure facility thousands of miles away, a team of linguists and psychological warfare experts began crafting transmissions. These weren't just messages, they were carefully constructed psychological weapons designed to exploit the Zorn's cultural and military mindset. "Make them question everything," was the simple directive. As night fell over the Earth-based facilities, the first wave of adaptive response was taking shape. Quantum-encrypted communication protocols were being refined. Modular weapon systems were being redesigned. Psychological warfare algorithms were being trained on massive datasets of Zorn communication and cultural information. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked at the holographic display one more time. The encounter with the Horizon's Promise was more than a single battle. It was the first move in a much larger game. A game humanity intended to win not just through force, but through intelligence, adaptability, and a deep understanding of the complex systems of conflict. "Get some rest," she told her team. "Tomorrow, we rewrite the rules of interstellar engagement." The Zorn returned with a vengeance, their massive battle group stretching across nearly a parsec of space. 3 primary carrier ships, each the size of a small moon, accompanied by 27 cruisers and over 200 fighter squadrons. This was no mere raid. This was total war. Major Thomas Walker studied the incoming tactical projections from the command deck of the U.S. Prometheus, Earth's most advanced combat vessel. Unlike traditional warships, the Prometheus was less a single entity and more a living, breathing combat network. Its hull was composed of adaptive nanometamaterials that could reconfigure molecular structures in milliseconds, transforming from defensive shielding to offensive weapon platforms with impossible speed. "They're using a classic Zorn convergence formation," Walker murmured to his tactical eye, an advanced system named ARIA, Adaptive Responsive Intelligence Algorithm. Predictable, hierarchical, vulnerable. ARIA's holographic representation flickered to life, a translucent blue humanoid figure that moved with an unsettling blend of mechanical precision and organic fluidity. Analyzing combat potential, the AI reported. Zorn fleet demonstrates 97.3% statistical similarity to previous engagement models. Recommendation: asymmetric response protocol. Walker's neural interface hummed with incoming data streams. Each member of his squadron wasn't just a pilot, but a node in a quantum-encrypted combat network. Their ships moved not as individual units, but as a coordinated living system that could predict and counter alien tactics faster than biological intelligence could comprehend. Commander Krelvax of the Zorn fleet believed this attack would be different. His lead carrier, the Void Render, bristled with weaponry that had subjugated dozens of species. Plasma cannons capable of liquefying planetary surfaces, quantum disruptors that could shred molecular bonds, psychological warfare systems designed to induce instant panic. Total annihilation, Krelvax growled to his bridge crew. No survivors, no mercy. The first engagement began with traditional Zorn tactics. Massive energy weapons carved through space, targeting what appeared to be vulnerable human formations. But each human ship was nothing more than a holographic projection, a quantum-entangled decoy that could exist in multiple potential states simultaneously. The real vessels moved with impossible grace. Walker's squadron didn't just dodge enemy fire. They transformed the very battlefield. Nano-adaptive hull materials absorbed incoming energy, redirecting plasma strikes into complex diffraction patterns that confused alien targeting systems. What should have been devastating attacks became harmless light shows. Initiating distributed combat algorithm, ARIA announced. Suddenly, the human ships weren't just defending. They were attacking from impossible angles, using quantum positioning that allowed them to essentially exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Zorn weapon systems, designed for linear combat, simply couldn't process the mathematical impossibility of human tactical movement. Each human pilot was augmented, their reflexes enhanced by neural interfaces that allowed them to process combat information thousands of times faster than standard biological reaction times. They weren't just fighting, they were conducting a technological symphony, each ship a musical note in a complex, adaptive composition of warfare. Krelvax watched in mounting horror as his supposedly invincible fleet was systematically dismantled. Human vessels didn't just avoid his attacks, they seemed to predict them before they were even conceived. "Impossible," he muttered, his multiple eyes struggling to track the human movements. The Prometheus itself was a marvel of technological innovation. Its primary weapon wasn't a traditional energy cannon, but a quantum cascade system that could potentially unravel molecular bonds at a fundamental level. But Walker didn't use it to destroy, only to demonstrate humanity's overwhelming technological superiority. Entire Zorn squadrons found themselves suddenly disabled, not destroyed, not killed, simply neutralized. Their systems shut down with surgical precision, leaving crews alive but completely helpless. It was a message more powerful than total destruction. We can end you completely. We choose not to. As the battle concluded, less than 17 minutes after it began, the human fleet had not lost a single ship. The Zorn battle group was reduced to a collection of powerless vessels, drifting silently in the vast darkness of space. Major Walker allowed himself a slight smile. Tactical engagement complete, ARIA. Prepare standard post-combat communication protocols. The technological symphony of human warfare had just played its second movement, and the galaxy was beginning to listen. The CNUP Psychological Warfare Division occupied a nondescript building in Colorado, its exterior deliberately mundane to mask the complexity of operations within. Dr. Jason Miller stood before a holographic display that mapped the intricate psychological infrastructure of the Zorn civilization. Each connection pointed a delicate web of cultural, biological, and communication pathways. They're not just a military, Miller explained to his team. They're a completely integrated sociological system. Every aspect of their culture is designed around dominance hierarchies. The team of linguists, anthropologists, and AI specialists worked with surgical precision. Their goal wasn't destruction. It was systematic deconstruction of the Zorn's collective psychological framework. Miller's primary weapon was information, precisely crafted transmissions that would penetrate the Zorn's communication networks like a virus, challenging their most fundamental beliefs about warfare, hierarchy, and cultural superiority. The first transmission was a masterpiece of psychological engineering. Using quantum-encrypted channels intercepted during previous encounters, they'd broadcast a series of holographic and data-rich messages directly into Zorn communication networks. The content was brilliantly subversive. Each transmission appeared to come from within the Zorn's own command structure. They showed tactical failures, strategic miscalculations, and most dangerously, moments of doubt from high-ranking Zorn commanders. These weren't fabrications, but carefully edited real communications, recontextualized to maximum psychological effect. "Watch how we fragment their internal narrative," Miller murmured to his lead AI specialist, Dr. Elena Rodriguez. The AI, nicknamed SFANX, began correlating psychological impact in real time. Each transmission was a precision instrument designed to introduce doubt, create internal friction, and systematically erode the Zorn's collective confidence. Meanwhile, parallel transmissions began reaching other galactic civilizations. These weren't aggressive communications, but meticulously crafted narratives that demonstrated humanity's approach to conflict. They showed the Zorn attacks, but framed them not as acts of human aggression, but as defensive responses to unprovoked raids. In Zorn command centers across multiple star systems, senior commanders found themselves facing an unprecedented psychological assault. Their communication networks, once a source of strength, now became vectors of internal doubt. Commander Krelvax, still dealing with the humiliation of his recent defeat, received a series of encrypted transmissions that seemed to originate from his own high command. They suggested strategic incompetence, questioned his leadership, and hinted at potential replacements. What Krelvax didn't realize was that each message was a carefully constructed psychological weapon. The transmissions didn't just target individual commanders. They attacked the fundamental cultural mythology of the Zorn, their belief in absolute martial superiority. Mathematical projections, tactical analyses, and strategic breakdowns were presented in a way that systematically dismantled their self-perception. Dr. Miller watched the psychological impact spread like a complex mathematical equation coming to life. "We're not destroying them," he explained to a visiting military strategist. "We're giving them the opportunity to see themselves differently. Every civilization has a narrative about itself. We're simply helping them rewrite that narrative." Sphinx began generating predictive models of potential Zorn responses. Each potential reaction was mapped, analyzed, and a corresponding psychological counter-strategy was developed in milliseconds. The most insidious aspect of the human approach was its fundamental humanity. The transmissions didn't paint the Zorn as monsters to be destroyed. They presented them as a species capable of change, of growth, of understanding. Some of the most powerful messages were simple demonstrations of restraint, detailed records of battles where humans could have completely annihilated Zorn forces, but chose instead to disable and preserve life. Each transmission was a quiet challenge. What would you do in our position? As weeks passed, the psychological impact became clear. Zorn military units began experiencing unprecedented levels of internal communication breakdown. Commanders questioned orders. Strategic units became hesitant. The rigid hierarchy that had been their greatest strength was now their most significant vulnerability. Dr. Miller allowed himself a small smile. Warfare wasn't just about weapons, it was about narrative. And humanity was rewriting the entire concept of conflict. Prepare the next transmission sequence, he told HFY. Let's continue the conversation. The Horizon's promise led a strike force of 5 specially configured vessels deep into Zorn territory. Captain Michael Reynolds studied the holographic star maps, each potential route calculated with mathematical precision. This wasn't an invasion. It was a surgical intervention designed to send a message that would echo through multiple star systems. Their target, the Zorn's primary logistical hub in the Krell Nebula, a massive space station that served as the primary support infrastructure for their raiding fleets. Destroying it would be simple, but simple wasn't the point. Tactical overlay, Reynolds commanded. Araya, the ship's AI, projected a detailed 3-dimensional representation of the target. Every defense system, communication network, and critical infrastructure point was highlighted in precise detail. The human strategy wasn't about maximum destruction. It was about maximum impact with minimal casualties. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Nakamura, the mission's tactical specialist, reviewed the final approach vectors. We're going to demonstrate controlled precision, she explained to the strike team. Every action is a message. The approach was a masterpiece of strategic complexity. The human ships used quantum camouflage technologies that made them virtually undetectable, slipping through the Zorn's most advanced sensor networks like ghosts. Where previous species might have launched a full-scale assault, the human fleet prepared for a surgical strike that would communicate more through restraint than through violence. As they entered the final approach, Reynolds understood the true nature of their mission. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a complex form of interstellar communication. The first phase of the attack began with a complete shutdown of the station's external communication networks. Not through destructive means, but through an incredibly sophisticated quantum interference pattern that essentially made the entire station invisible to its own communication systems. Precision-targeted electromagnetic pulses disabled specific critical systems. Power generation remained intact. Life support continued functioning. But the station's ability to coordinate military operations was completely neutralized. Selective disruption complete, Araya reported. Critical infrastructure began to systematically shut down. Weapon systems became inoperable. Communication relays went dark. But no lives were lost. No physical damage was caused that couldn't be quickly repaired. It was a demonstration of absolute technological superiority coupled with remarkable restraint. The most critical targets received even more nuanced treatment. Navigation systems were recalibrated rather than destroyed. Weapon control interfaces were reprogrammed instead of being obliterated. Each action was a carefully constructed message. We can completely disable you. We choose not to. Inside the station, Zorn commanders watched in mounting confusion and terror. Their most advanced defensive systems were being systematically neutralized by an enemy that seemed to move like a ghost, striking with impossible precision. What made the human approach truly terrifying was its calculated nature. This wasn't rage or destruction. This was a clinical, almost surgical demonstration of technological supremacy. As the operation concluded, Reynolds transmitted a single, simple message across all Zorn communication frequencies. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a statement of principle. We are capable of ending this conflict completely, the message read. We choose dialogue instead. The entire operation lasted less than 17 minutes. When Zorn repair teams finally managed to restore their primary systems, they discovered something unprecedented. The humans had not only neutralized their capabilities, but had left behind detailed repair instructions and efficiency recommendations. It was psychological warfare of the highest order, a demonstration that humanity's technological superiority was matched only by its capacity for restraint and cooperation. Lieutenant Commander Nakamura looked at the final tactical assessment and allowed herself a slight smile. "Mission accomplished," she told Reynolds. "We've just rewritten the rules of interstellar conflict." The Horizon's Promise began its return journey, leaving behind a station that was disabled but intact, a perfect metaphor for humanity's approach to conflict. Not destruction, not domination, but a fundamental restructuring of possibility. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had just changed the conversation. The United Earth Diplomatic Corps occupied a massive orbital station that orbited just beyond Earth's atmosphere. Ambassador Lauren Chen stood in the central conference chamber, surrounded by holographic representations of diplomatic contacts from dozens of galactic civilizations. The Zorn's desperate attempt to rally other species against humanity was unfolding exactly as Earth's strategic planners had anticipated. "What we're witnessing," Chen told her primary diplomatic AI advisor, "is the most complex game of interstellar politics ever played." The conference chamber was a marvel of technological and psychological engineering. Each holographic representation wasn't just a communication tool, it was a carefully constructed interface that could process multiple layers of linguistic, cultural, and psychological information simultaneously. The Zorn's diplomatic envoys had arrived at the Multi-Species Council meeting with what they believed was damning evidence of human aggression. They presented recordings of the attacks on their logistical hub, carefully edited to paint humanity as a ruthless, expansionist threat. But humanity had anticipated every move. Before the Zorn could complete their presentation, Ambassador Chen's AI system had already distributed comprehensive data packets to every diplomatic representative. These weren't simple counterarguments. They were meticulously documented records that showed the full context of every interaction. Each data packet included complete recordings of Zorn raiding attempts, detailed analysis of human defensive responses, comprehensive logs of civilian and military communications, precise documentation of lives saved during each encounter. The Vraxian delegates, a species known for their strict neutrality, were the first to shift their position. Their lead diplomat, a crystalline being named Zexrel, studied the human-provided documentation with growing interest. The humans could have destroyed entire Zorn systems, Zexrel observed. Instead, they chose precise, limited intervention. The diplomatic chamber became a battlefield of information, with humanity wielding data like the most sophisticated of weapons. Chen understood that this wasn't just about defending against the Zorn's accusations. It was about fundamentally reshaping the galactic understanding of human capabilities and intentions. Her AI advisor, Diplomat, began running complex simulation models of potential diplomatic outcomes. Each potential response from other species was mapped, analyzed, and a corresponding strategy was developed in milliseconds. The most brilliant aspect of humanity's approach was its fundamental transparency. Where other species might have classified their military actions, humans presented everything with remarkable openness. "We have nothing to hide," Chen stated repeatedly. "Our actions speak for themselves." The Zorn delegation found themselves in an unprecedented situation. Their carefully prepared narrative of human aggression was systematically dismantled by the very evidence they had brought forward. What became clear to the assembled diplomatic representatives was that humanity represented something entirely new in galactic politics. Not a conquering force, not a defensive paranoid civilization, but a species capable of overwhelming technological superiority that consistently chose restraint. The economic implications were equally significant. The data packets included detailed proposals for collaborative research, open trade agreements, and technological exchange programs. Humanity wasn't just defending itself, it was offering partnership. Zexrel of the Vraxians was the first to formally break ranks. The human approach demonstrates a level of strategic and moral complexity unprecedented in our galactic records, the crystalline diplomat announced. One by one, other species began to reconsider their positions. The Zorn's attempt to isolate humanity was transforming into a diplomatic catastrophe for themselves. Ambassador Chen allowed herself a slight smile. This was warfare of the most sophisticated kind, a conflict resolved not through violence, but through information, transparency, and a fundamental commitment to cooperative principles. Diplomat, she murmured to her AI advisor, prepare the next set of collaborative proposals. The game of interstellar diplomacy continued, with humanity several moves ahead of everyone else. As the conference concluded, it became clear that the most powerful weapon humanity possessed wasn't found in its advanced technology or military capabilities. It was something far more complex, the ability to transform conflict into opportunity. Commander Krulvax's flagship, the Void Render, assembled the most massive battle fleet in Zorn historical records. This was no longer about raiding or territorial expansion. This was about survival, about restoring the Zorn's shattered pride and reputation. 600 combat vessels, 12 primary battle carriers, quantum disruptor cannons capable of liquefying entire planetary surfaces, psychological warfare systems designed to induce absolute terror. Every weapon, every ship represented the culmination of centuries of Zorn military doctrine. Their target, Earth. The assault began with what the Zorn believed would be overwhelming force. Quantum translation points erupted across the solar system's outer reaches, revealing wave after wave of Zorn vessels. Their formation was a complex mathematical nightmare of interlocking fire zones and cascading attack vectors. Major Thomas Walker watched from the U.S. Prometheus's command deck, his neural interface humming with incoming tactical data. Araya, the ship's AI, processed information at speeds that would overwhelm biological consciousness. Analyzing total assault potential, Araya reported, Zorn fleet demonstrates 99.7% commitment to total destruction protocol. Walker understood this was more than a military engagement. It was a civilizational moment of truth. The human response began before the Zorn even completed their translation. Distributed quantum defense networks, invisible systems that had been quietly embedded throughout the solar system, began their complex dance. These weren't simple weapon platforms. They were living, adaptive intelligence networks that could reconfigure faster than the Zorn could comprehend. Space itself seemed to become a weapon. Entire squadrons of Zorn fighters found themselves trapped in quantum interference fields. Their most advanced navigation systems became useless, ships tumbling in mathematically impossible trajectories. Not destroyed. Simply neutralized. The Zorn's quantum disruptor cannons, weapons that could theoretically tear molecular bonds apart, discovered they were firing into complex holographic projections. Each target was a quantum-entangled probability field that could exist in multiple states simultaneously. Commander Krulvax watched in mounting horror as his supposedly invincible assault began to dissolve. Impossible, he muttered, his multiple eyes struggling to track the human responses. The Prometheus moved like a living weapon, not a traditional spacecraft. Its hull could reconfigure at the molecular level, absorbing incoming energy and redirecting it with impossible precision. Zorn weapon strikes that should have obliterated entire sections simply dissipated, transformed into harmless energy patterns. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez, coordinating from Earth's Orbital Defense Command, implemented a strategy that was part warfare, part mathematical performance art. Human vessels didn't just defend. They danced around Zorn attack formations, turning the entire solar system into a complex, adaptive combat network. Each human ship was a node in a quantum-encrypted intelligence system. They moved not as individual units, but as a single massively parallel consciousness. Where the Zorn saw individual targets, humanity presented an impossible-to-comprehend combat organism. 17 minutes into the assault, the Zorn fleet had been completely neutralized. Not destroyed. Not annihilated. Simply rendered completely inoperable. The final transmission from the Prometheus was a masterpiece of psychological and military communication, a precise, mathematically perfect deconstruction of the Zorn's entire assault, transmitted across all their communication frequencies. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a declaration of victory. It was a clinical, almost dispassionate demonstration of total technological superiority. Major Walker watched the final tactical assessment and understood they had just changed the fundamental nature of interstellar conflict. Mission complete, he told ARI. The solar system remained pristine. No civilian infrastructure damage. No unnecessary destruction. Just a perfect surgical demonstration of humanity's true capabilities. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had just redefined the very concept of warfare. 5 years after the final Zorn assault, the transformation was almost unrecognizable. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the Galactic Collaborative Research Station, watching a mixed team of human and Zorn scientists working together on a complex quantum communication project. What had begun as a military conflict had become something far more profound, a complete social reconstruction. The Zorn Confederation no longer existed in its original form. Instead, a new collaborative governance structure had emerged, guided by principles of democratic participation, technological exchange, and mutual understanding. It wasn't forced. It was a carefully engineered process of societal evolution. Commander Krulvax, once a symbol of aggressive military expansion, now served as a primary diplomatic liaison. His transformation was perhaps the most visible evidence of the deeper systemic changes. "We didn't conquer them," Dr. Rodriguez explained to a visiting xenosociological research team. "We gave them the opportunity to see themselves differently." The process had been intricate and multi-layered. Humanity's approach wasn't about punishment or subjugation. It was about systematic, intelligent restructuring. Economic systems were the first to change. The humans introduced collaborative economic models that demonstrated how cooperation could be more profitable than conflict. Advanced AI systems helped design economic frameworks that aligned individual Zorn community interests with broader collective goals. Educational systems were completely redesigned. Where previous Zorn education had emphasized martial prowess and hierarchical dominance, new curricula focused on critical thinking, collaborative problem-solving, and technological innovation. Psychological rehabilitation programs, developed by a team of human and Zorn specialists, worked to deconstruct the cultural narratives of superiority and aggression. These weren't punitive measures, but sophisticated interventions designed to help the Zorn understand alternative ways of existing. The technological exchanges were equally transformative. Humanity didn't simply give the Zorn advanced technology. They created collaborative research environments that allowed Zorn scientists to develop their own innovative solutions. Captain Michael Reynolds, now heading the Interstellar Collaborative Development Initiative, understood the deeper strategy. "We're not changing them," he often said. "We're giving them the tools to change themselves." The most remarkable aspect was the speed and depth of the transformation. Within 5 years, the Zorn had gone from a militaristic, raiding civilization to a key partner in galactic scientific and diplomatic efforts. Their first major collaborative project was a massive interstellar communication network that would benefit multiple species. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The civilization that once sought to destroy humanity was now working alongside them to connect the galaxy. Psychological monitoring systems showed a dramatic shift in Zorn cultural metrics. Aggression markers decreased. Collaborative problem-solving indicators increased. The rigid hierarchical structures that had defined their society began to dissolve, replaced by more flexible, adaptive social models. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up a holographic representation of the societal changes. It wasn't a linear progression, but a complex, adaptive transformation that touched every aspect of Zorn civilization. "This is what true victory looks like," she told her team. "Not destruction, not subjugation, but the opportunity for fundamental positive change." The Zorn's military leaders were being retrained as diplomatic specialists. Their vast logistical capabilities, once used for raiding, were now applied to humanitarian and scientific initiatives. Every aspect of their society was being reimagined. Ambassador Lauren Chen, who had been instrumental in the diplomatic processes, summarized it perfectly during a Galactic conference. "We didn't defeat the Zorn. We helped them defeat the worst aspects of themselves." As the observation deck's lights dimmed, Dr. Rodriguez watched the human and Zorn scientists continue their work. Complex holographic displays showed intricate quantum communication algorithms, a perfect metaphor for the larger transformation. What had begun as a conflict had become something far more significant, a demonstration that technological superiority meant nothing without the wisdom to use it responsibly. That true strength wasn't about destruction, but about the capacity to create, to understand, and to transform. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had just redefined the very concept of interstellar engagement.